Hello everyone, and as they say here in Israel, shalom to all of you. We're in Israel. This is Jerusalem behind me, the city walls of Jerusalem that you can see. And we're here for a special episode of the India Story. Every once in a while, the India Story will travel out to some of India's key partners, key allies, countries that are particularly important for the India Story now and the future. And Israel, very much a country that is central to India's view on the world right now. Why do I say this? After all, was it just 30 or 35 years ago, you couldn't even travel to Israel. As an Indian citizen, you weren't allowed to come here. There were no diplomatic relations. And then diplomatic relations were established. And then after that, especially in the last 4 or 5 years, those relations have become close and closer and even closer to the point of that they're now strategic allies that extend in a number of regions. They extend in the field of defense, they extend in the field of economy, they extend particularly in high-tech, and high-tech in areas like the internet, high-tech in cybersecurity, and high-tech in clean energy and agriculture, drip irrigation, those sort of areas where Israel is very strong are places where the partnership is happening. And I'm going to be talking to you about that over the next half an hour. The India-Israel partnership, how Israel can play a role in taking the India story forward, and what are some of the concerns that we have to keep in mind. The two countries have had an interesting history, which I'm going to touch upon. But when you look at the present, I think it's important and interesting to see the similarities that exist in many, many areas. Similarities, you'll say, have you gone completely crazy? Because at the end of the day, Israel, a tiny little country, which is actually smaller than the state of Meghalaya. Yeah, that's how small Israel is. 9 million people. And then you got India with 1.4 billion people. But when you look past all of that, I think there are important lessons that both countries have to learn, perhaps from each other. The question of diversity, the question of how do you coexist in a multicultural, multi-ethnic sort of a country, what are the rules and regulations there should be. And as we are seeing just today, on Wednesday, with the protests that are taking place in Israel, this is not a settled matter by any stretch of imagination in Israel any more than it is in India. You've seen these giant protests, and I'm playing some of the pictures for you, of people who are complaining and protesting about judicial reforms that are happening in Israel. The question of how much of a control the parliament should have over the judiciary or vice versa. Who should select the judges? Does any of that sound familiar to you? Yes, of course. We've been hearing this debate taking place in India for a really long period. So some of the questions about how do you build a society are very common. Then it comes to what sort of an economy should you build? And again, there are similarities between the two countries. Israel, by nature, Israelis tend to be argumentative. They have a tradition of being able to push back. They're not a very regimented society. Again, does that sound familiar? Very similar to India. And in this sort of a chaos, sometimes high-tech industries thrive and they do really well. We're seeing this happening in Israel. Israel is a startup nation, is one of the hubs of high-tech everywhere in the world. And we're starting to see that in India as well. And then there are other similarities. Countries surrounded by hostile neighbors on all sides. What does that do to you? What are the defense relations and ties that we need to build up? And it's no surprise that defense has been at the core of the India-Israel partnership for a long period of time. Secretly at first, and then later. So a number of areas for the two countries to really think about as we go forward, and all those partnerships will have to be built. India has found in Israel a partner and an ally right now. And Israel, a country that sometimes does feel surrounded by enemies on all sides, and these days is once again facing a lot of hostile press in a lot of directions, does look east increasingly often and look at India and see a possible a partner and a friend and an ally out there. And that's been underlined by some of the latest developments that are now happening, such as I2U2, which is India, Israel, US and UAE, partnerships that are being built after the Abraham Accords. Well, before we analyze all of this with the ambassador or anybody else, here's a look at the history of India-Israel relations.
India and Israel today enjoy strong bilateral ties that include extensive and comprehensive economic, military and political relations. But it wasn't always so. In fact, India voted against the partition of Palestine to create the Jewish state in 1947, a controversial partition that led to a lot of violence immediately after. Violence which continues between the states of Israel and Palestine in modern times. India also voted against Israel's admission to the United Nations in 1949. In 1950, however, India officially recognized the state of Israel, with Prime Minister Nehru stating that Israel is a fact. Despite India allowing Israel to open a consulate in what was then the city of Bombay, now Mumbai, in 1953 a full diplomatic relationship was not established between the two countries and relations remained relatively informal. Despite Israel's support to India during the Indo-Pakistan War of 1971, which saw the country even secretly supply arms to India, full diplomatic relations with Israel were not established until the early 1990s. India formally established relations with Israel when it established an embassy in Tel Aviv in January 1992. Since then, ties between the two countries have flourished due to common strategic interests. Defense and agriculture have formed the two main pillars of the bilateral ties. Although in recent years, relations have seen growth in a broad spectrum of areas. Prime Minister Narendra Modi visited Israel in 2017, becoming the first Indian PM to do so, and signed 7 memorandums of understanding across fields like innovation, technology, space and science. More agreements were signed the following year. In 2018, when Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu visited India, from bilateral trade of around $200 million in 1992, trade between India and Israel stands at $7.86 billion in 2021-2022. India is Israel's second largest trading partner in Asia and the 9th largest globally. Though bilateral trade is dominated mainly by diamonds and chemicals, both countries envision a strong technology-based partnership in the future, befitting two knowledge economies. Defense, however, remains one of the top areas of collaboration between the two countries. India is the largest buyer of Israel's military equipment, and Israel is the second largest supplier of arms to India after Russia. Strategic ties between the two countries extend to intelligence sharing focused on combating terror groups and joint military training exercises. In 2021, marking another cornerstone in deepening relations, India and Israel joined the United States and the UAE to form the I2U2 bloc, to deepen technological and private sector collaboration in the region and tackle transnational challenges in 6 focus areas. The formation of this bloc favors India's foreign policy goals of pragmatic multilateral cooperation. Although the current disposition in Israel is attracting some controversy, diplomatic and economic ties with India continue to be strong. On February 22nd, Israeli Ambassador Nir Barkat said that Israel's handing over of the strategically important Haifa port to the Adani Group is a reflection of the trust that Israel has on India. The two countries have also been in negotiations over a free trade agreement which has been in the works for a while. However, the ambassador indicated that there could be movement on that front when Benjamin Netanyahu visits India later this year.
Well, of course, the person who's at the helm of championing India-Israel relations and taking them forward is Ambassador Sanjeev Singla, who's the Indian ambassador to Israel. It's got a lot on his plate, of course, all these various aspects of it, the economy and defense relations and the rest of it. But also what happens now with I2U2? How do you build on India-Israel relations as one of the centers of India's engagement with the Middle East? And also new initiatives that are now happening. For example, Oman has just agreed to allow direct overflights over its territory, which means that you can have much quicker direct flights from Israel to cities like Bengaluru or Mumbai. And that could, of course, make cooperation that much deeper. He caught up with us for this very special conversation just a short while back. This is what he said to me. Well, who better to get a sense of how the India-Israel relationship is really progressing than the ambassador of India to Israel, Ambassador Singla. It's such a pleasure to have you, talking to us. This has become an increasingly important relationship, right? And considering that for so many years, 2-3 decades, there was absolutely no contact, not even a diplomatic relationship, and now suddenly it seems to be a very close strategic relationship.
Absolutely, and I think you said it yourself, that if we look at the history of our relationship, you can broadly divide it into 3 phases. starting from 1950, phase one, which lasted for almost 4 decades, when there was minimal contact, and if at all there was contact, the whole relationship was sought to be kept inside a closet. And then you have the second phase starting in 1992.
We couldn't travel here, so our passports used to carry saying not allowed to visit Israel.
Absolutely. And then came the second phase starting 1992, when we formally upgraded the relationship to full diplomatic ties at the level of ambassadors. And that lasted for another 25 years till about 2017. And during this phase, the relationship did come out of the closet. There were visits from the Israeli side, there were visits from the Indian side, but even then, the entire relationship was sought to be underplayed. And then comes the third phase, which is the current phase, which began with the historic visit of our Prime Minister to Israel in July 2017. And that's when we upgraded our relationship to the level of a strategic partnership.
So strategic partnership means that we say that there are multiple areas that we're going to work on together. And which ones would they be? I mean, there's obviously defense and agriculture and drip irrigation and high technology. Which would be some of the areas that would come to your mind?
I think the real story in our relationship right now is the focus of both the leaderships, both the countries, on strengthening and deepening our innovation partnership. And that's coming from two countries which are knowledge economies, which are moving in that direction. And knowledge partnership, innovation partnership, that's a huge landscape which covers practically every area, whether it's agriculture, whether it's water, whether it's high-tech or critical and emerging technologies like AI and quantum.
I've spent a fair amount of time now talking to Israeli entrepreneurs since I've been here. And it's interesting that there does seem to be some sort of a synergy that can come to play. They're obviously very innovative. They're figuring out lots of things, and it comes from being a small country, and you've got to innovate somehow, and you've got to keep up, and the army experience helps with that. And at the same time, they don't have scale. So that's why if you can take some of that innovation and implement it or partner with India and do it at scale, that's when both countries could benefit massively.
Oh, absolutely. And I think there are 2 points here. One, yes, Israel has its own niche strengths as a startup nation, especially in life sciences, in AI, in cybersecurity. India, of course, has its own niche strengths among the largest pools of scientific manpower, plus now the third largest startup nation in the world. But the new economy sectors on both sides are yet to discover each other completely. And that's one point we have to keep in mind, and that is where I think the future lies. We have world-class capabilities in our new economy sectors, which I don't think the Israeli side is fully aware of. And likewise, the Israelis have tremendous capabilities, which you mentioned, their ecosystem, which we are not fully aware of. And we are trying to see how we can put these two sectors together organically. With a minimal footprint of the government. So that's one point. And second point is on the scaling, which you mentioned. There, of course, the Israeli side, Israeli entrepreneurs have to remember that India is a very cost-conscious or a value-conscious market. So yes, there are tremendous opportunities of scaling up, provided you hit that right sweet spot.
So you've got to have the innovation, but bring the price point down at a level which, and that can actually help them also, take it global. There's some of the other initiatives that we've been hearing about. This last question is on like I2U2 and the fact that Israel's also opening up to other countries like UAE, which are again close strategic allies and close partners of India. So is India working on facilitating some of that, and how is that entire? I know there's been a lot of talk about that in the recent past.
Yes. Again, I2U2 is an endeavor to take advantage of the changing landscape in this region in the wake of Abraham Accords. And there the emphasis is on the 6 identified sectors, but I think the crucial point there is to involve private sector in executing some of these infrastructure projects in these 5 or 6 areas. And to that extent, it's, I think, still work in progress. We have 2 projects which are underway, one on renewable energy, another one on food security, both of them in India. And each of the 4 partners brings something to the table by way of contribution, whether it's technology, whether it's capital. And as you're aware, we had a meeting of the Sherpas, of the stakeholders in the UAE only about 10 days ago. And I'm sure that these two projects would pick up momentum, and then we can go on to bigger things.
All right. Master, thank you so much for talking to us.
Pleasure.
Thank you. Now to discuss the future of India-Israel relations and this region in general and all the stuff that we've been seeing, also judicial reforms and other things, it's such a pleasure to have with us the Minister for Economy and Industry, Mr. Nir Barkat. Thank you so much, sir, for talking to us.
Thank you very much. Welcome to Israel.
Thank you so much. It's been a pleasure to be out here and to see all the great and innovative stuff that's going on, which of course is, I think, one of the key underpinnings of the partnership, as you're also seeing, taking it forward. Israeli innovation, Indian scale, you put them together, you could possibly have magic.
Indeed, I think I come from the tech sector. That's my background, and I just had a meeting with a beautiful mission from India. And we see the future. The future is that Israel brings to the table innovation and entrepreneurship, and India brings scale and scope, and those two go very well together. We were discussing opportunities in desert tech, in areas of water creation and management, in energy, agriculture is a big deal, food from the sea, and a couple of other ideas that are very relevant. Israel is a very tiny country. We're less than 10 million people. So working with a country that has 1.4 billion people is a huge opportunity for Israelis. And hopefully you'll be able to find innovation in Israel that makes 1 + 1 = 3.
So let's just look about the historic. I'm going to stick with the economy first and then come to other things. So if you're looking at the economy, traditionally this relationship has been a close relationship. It's been about agriculture, it's been about water, it's been about defense. All three still potentially areas where there's lots of upside, because India is going to be a water scarce country. India is going to have to figure out how do we deal with water. The nature of defense and technology is going to change out there. Israel is doing great work in lasers and other things which were the future of defense technologies.
Indeed.
So those three traditional areas of partnership, what's your vision for those?
I think that innovation is key. Yet once you have good ideas of, for example, give you an example. We are in the process of domesticating bluefin tuna and yellowfin tuna and food from the sea. Okay, to supply those bluefin and yellowfin and other food from the sea to a country with 1.4 billion people is different than supplying them to a country with 10 million people. So the scope and the relationship, I see a huge opportunity working together. Now, we have the southern part of our country, the Negev, is by far the most technological desert in the world. And entrepreneurs in the region...
But it's a technological desert. That's
and entrepreneurs that live in the Negev figure out all kinds of technologies. Let me give you an example. Drip irrigation. All over the world was invented in the Negev in Israel. And so companies are selling billions of dollars worth every year of drip irrigation and technology to manage the water, the scarcity of water. We have the ability to take salt water and make it water that is people capable of drinking.
And India's got such a large coastline. If you can actually do proper desalination, that means you can actually solve the water problem. Water is going to be a major crisis in India.
Exactly.
If you can survive in the Negev desert and thrive in the Negev desert, you can thrive in just about any part of India.
And so the meeting we had, brainstorming on all these opportunities, are huge. And the roles of the governments, the Indian government and the Israeli government, would be to create a government-to-government infrastructure that enables business to do business-to-business transactions and make it practical. There's no doubt in my mind, from my experience as an entrepreneur, that those opportunities are ahead of us. So what we're doing today has the ability to be 10 times larger once we manage those relationships wisely. And I think that the fact that there's a very good ecosystem and good feeling between the people, the Indian people and the Israeli people. I know, I've been there. I've been to India a few years ago and we loved it. And I know that Indians that come here love it. The fact that there's such good ecosystem makes it even better to have better business.
Also, let's look at the opportunity right now. There are clearly issues around China in general. Israel has often built its tech ecosystem with America, talk to America and work with American companies and scale it that way. India gives you a different opportunity. You can do it at a much lower cost base. You can be innovative in a manner that appeals to 8 billion people instead of a small section of people. Is that something you would actually think about?
Yeah, well, the way I view the future is look at Israel's business clusters. Defense, desert tech, agrotech, cybersecurity, classic high tech, and others. And we want to make sure that those businesses cooperate with other countries around the world. We base our economy on export. And actually, another role I have as Minister of Economy and Industry is to bring more goods to decrease the cost of living in our country. So it's a mutual goal to increase the trade, both import and export. Now, India is clearly based as a friend and an ally to Israel. And I think that once we zoom in and look at those clusters, business clusters, the opportunities are huge. And the fact that you think big, you have no choice but to think big. And we sometimes think innovative and small. That connection could help us scale our export and help create investment opportunities for the benefit of both people. So I certainly see that path, which is a very, very clear path for growth for both sides.
In the immediate future, to just wrap up the India part of it, I2U2 has obviously been something that India has been very closely working on, the Abraham Accords, opening it up to other countries, including UAE, with whom India has very close relations. So that's been one step. Let's talk about a FTA. Is that something that is critical and crucial for the relationship?
Yeah, it helps. It helps a lot because what we do in the FTA is actually listen to the business people, what they need. And it should serve closer business-to-business ideas and more import and export to both sides. From our experience doing with other countries, it's very beneficial. And we would like it to be targeted for the benefit of the businesses of both sides. And then you'll see that everything else will improve.
Mr. Nir Barkat, thank you so much.
My pleasure. Thank you. Welcome to Israel again.
Thank you. And that's it in this episode of the India Story. I'll be in a different location next week, but do keep track of what's happening in India-Israel relations. Because, I have to say one thing. There is certainly a great amount of person-to-person, people-to-people bonding. The number of people you'll meet here on the streets in Israel who say, hey, we've been to India 5 times, we've been to India 6 times, we went there after the army, we went to Goa, we went to Dharamshala, we loved it out there, we feel very much at home in India. That does come through, and that is a very good foundation to build country-to-country relationships on.